Hi everybody, I've been asked to provide a short update on what is going on with Dan Neidle's complaint that he's made to the Wyoming Bar Association. So this is the organisation that regulates law firms in the state of Wyoming, which is where Ecclesia Law, or MLITR Research, is registered as an LLC. Well, it's very, very clear on all of the information that is provided, documents, website, etc., that Ecclesia Law, as it says here, is operating exclusively under attorney-in-fact mandates granted by its clients through private powers of attorney, trust indentures and fiduciary appointments. Ecclesia Law does not act as a bar-regulated law practice. So there is a significant misunderstanding. Even Dan Neidle doesn't seem to grasp the fact that any member or envoy of Republic of Old Souls can appoint Ecclesia Law, trading as a trading style of MLITR Research, to operate under an attorney-in-fact mandate. That doesn't mean that Ecclesia Law is practicing with a bar license, because that's not what Ecclesia Law has been set up to do. Ecclesia Law has been set up to, or MLITR Research has been set up to achieve two things. The first is the attorney-in-fact services, which are research, forensic research into any matter in relation to the signature credit recoupment, trust indentures, securitizations of mortgages, all sorts of technical areas that Ecclesia Law can create research papers on. And there is no requirement for a bar license to create research papers. There is also no requirement for Ecclesia Law trading style of MLITR Research to provide research papers to its members or to publish them on its website. So if we look at the types of research papers that have been created and published on the Ecclesia Law website, it's very clear here that I create these papers as a consultant for MLITR Research. MLITR Research, Ecclesia Law, is not my firm. It is actually owned, the shares are owned by two other individuals that are operating as shareholder owner and controlling the MLITR Research service. So the first service is the provision of, basically it's forensic information and reporting and investigating complex matters like mortgage securitizations, investigating the linkage between the clearing banks and the investment banks for the purposes of the 945 tax modules, etc., etc. And it's not there to provide a legal service. It cannot represent members or envoys in courtrooms. It doesn't want to. It's not there to provide any kind of regulated legal service. But it can provide research, and it can provide forensic analysis on complex subjects, as described in all of these documents here, which I have created and published on this website, and also through Telegram, and also through the Ghost platform, which is like Substack. So all of these papers here demonstrate that I am absolutely not practicing or believing in pseudo-law, or OPCA as it's known. There's a huge number of papers written here. There's over 50 research papers that I've written which discuss the matters, the Great Escape Protocols, the art of legal warfare, pseudo-law, free man on the land, sovereign citizen, where I'm debunking that people who are using pseudo-law, free man on the land and sovereign citizen ideologies, what they are and why they don't work. Now, the interesting thing is that when Dan Neidle made his complaint to the Bar Association in Wyoming, he claimed that, first of all, he claimed that Ian Clifford was the principal of the firm, owned MLITR Research, and that Ian Clifford was practicing law without a license. Not only did he claim that, but he also claimed that Ian Clifford is a fugitive on the run, which is not true, because Dan Neidle absolutely knows that Order 34 2023 is a legal nullity and it's in the UK Court of Appeal right now. And Dan Neidle also knows that I don't practice pseudo law. I'm not operating as a sovereign citizen. I'm not operating under a free man on the land belief system. In fact, I am debunking all of those and warning people from using those methodologies. So why would Dan Neidle make a complaint to the Wyoming Bar Association? It's very, very simple. Dan Neidle is liable for tortious interference into the 2025 Matrix Freedom 98 series grantor trust that had filed 1099 OID with the IRS, had received 600 million in wages and tax transcripts, which confirm that the IRS 810 algorithm had checked from A through Z and was comfortable that these recoupments of signature credit were available to those grantor trusts. And the sabotage event that Amy Sanger engaged in, having reviewed, Amy Sanger having been aware of Dan Neidle's posts and blogs where he's saying that Ian Clifford is a tax fraudster, Amy Sanger then sabotages the recoupments for our membership, and that is why nobody so far in that group has had success on their 1099 OID signature credit recoupment, because of the sabotage that Amy Sanger applied by sending the fraud identity reports to the IRS for every single grant or trust, and claiming, together with the trustees of each trust, that they didn't know about being appointed as trustees, which is totally ridiculous and complete and utter bullshit. But Amy Sanger was very afraid that she was getting involved with Ian Clifford, who allegedly is a criminal, and she's also getting involved in tax fraud as the head of the trustee group. Now, where does she get that information from? She gets it from Dan Neidle, who was blogging about that on his very large and very well trusted platform of Tax Policy Associates. So this is the trigger point, one of the trigger points that's led to Amy Sanger basically sabotaging membership's recoupments. Now, since then, I have engaged with Dan Neidle on multiple occasions with emails, with attachments on them, which evidence what happened, evidence that the wages and tax transcripts were real, evidence my own wages and tax transcript with Dan Neidle, evidence that the signature credit of via 1099 OID through the Clifford protocol is completely compliant. And he doesn't argue about that anymore. He just keeps asking for evidence of all of the 600 million of recoupments. Now, obviously, that information is private information that belongs to the grantor trust. And the grantor trusts, of which there are 3,000 grantor trusts, aren't going to hand over private information to Dan Neidle. He's a journalist. He doesn't have any right for this information, and it would be breaching privacy law in every single area if anybody who's operating, if the trustee, which is MLITR Research, by the way, the appointed trustee for all of the newly created grantor trusts, and the previously created grantor trusts have no authority to provide Dan Neidle with individual evidence of wages and tax transcripts. I provided Dan Neidle with my wages and tax transcript, and I also invited Dan Neidle onto the ROS Media platform to have an interview with Andy Benson, who runs the ROS Media platform, where Andy Benson would provide his evidence of his wages and tax transcript along with his wife Kirsty Benson. They would actually show Dan Neidle that they had wages and tax transcripts as well, and give an affirmation and a confirmation that they are aware of all of the hundreds of wages and tax transcripts that came in 2025 that were scuppered and sabotaged by Amy Sanger. So Dan Neidle is very well aware of all of these things and has not commented on whether he would come on an interview with Andy Benson on the ROS Media platform. Dan Neidle is also very well aware of the case that's going on in New York, where Amy Sanger and Ian Clifford are presenting their evidence to the New York court in the Southern District of New York in relation to who owns the funds. I say the Indonesian company PTICS Remedy Consulting owns the funds that Amy Sanger transferred to her secret trust, and Amy Sanger says that she owns the funds because she opened the trust accounts in the name of the trust, and the PTICS Remedy Consulting, the Indonesian company, doesn't have any rights over those funds, which is totally ludicrous. Now, Dan Neidle is very well aware of this case because you can access the case details, which is what he's done. Now, Ecclesia Law, MLITR Research, wrote a forensic report on the trust indentures that Amy Sanger had used, and the trust indentures that she should have used to open the gold silver accounts. And that research was provided by me. I am a pro se litigant in this case in New York, to the New York Southern District of New York court under the PACER electronic upload system. Dan Neidle claims that research report that was conducted by Ecclesia Law trading as MLITR Research can't be used in the New York case, because he says that in order to write a forensic research report, the author of it needs to be a qualified lawyer. It's not correct. It's totally wrong. Anyway, so that's what's been going on. The complaint made by Dan Neidle is just another example of his tortious interference into the recoupments for our Republic of Old Souls members. Now he's complained to the Wyoming State Bar about the operations and the nature of MLITR Research, claiming that it needs a license from them when it doesn't, because it's not providing any regulated services that require a license. So here we go again. Ian Clifford is not the owner of this company. Ian Clifford doesn't provide legal services. Ian Clifford doesn't provide any services that require any regulatory license whatsoever. Ian Clifford is providing research and information only. So this is the same allegation that the FCA are making in the UK. The FCA claimed that Ian Clifford may have given may have provided regulated services in the United Kingdom. I've been saying I never have done. And of course now Dan Neidle, who is obviously an agent for the FCA, is saying that Ian Clifford may need a license in Wyoming to provide legal services. Well, I don't provide legal services. I don't own MLITR Research. I provide research as a consultant to MLITR Research. So this is obvious that Dan Neidle is working for the FCA as their agent, as I've been saying for the last few months. So let's just whiz through this. He's basically now admitted that he is tortuously interfering with the recoupments for our membership. There will be a claim mounted against Dan Neidle for $100 million. He already knows that. MLITR Research trading as Ecclesia Law, he's basically attacking the Republic of Old Souls membership. Again, not only did he attack the Matrix Freedom membership with his vicarious liability and tortious interference in relation to his blogs about tax fraud, which there's no evidence to support it. Now he's attacking the ROS, the Republic of Old Souls members and envoys who are expecting their recoupments, by attacking MLITR Research, who, by the way, is operating as appointed trustees of each individual grantor trust. So he's trying again to undermine the recoupments. For all of these reasons here, I published this document on the Telegram channel yesterday. You can read through that. There's no substance to anything that Dan Neidle is saying. I don't own MLITR Research. I don't provide any services that require a regulatory license. I'm not a sovereign citizen. I don't practice pseudo law. I'm not a free man on the land. It's all on the Ecclesia Law website. You can see that I don't believe in it. I don't practice it. None of my submissions to the New York court case are pseudo law. None of my submissions to the UK Court of Appeal are pseudo law. And by the way, Dan Neidle has those submissions because I sent them to him so he can see, and I provide the evidence that I'm not practicing pseudo law in any way whatsoever. So he's got the evidence of the wages and tax transcripts. This is Dan Neidle, and he still persists in claiming that he's seen no evidence of recoupments. He's been given all of the technical documents that I've published at Ecclesia Law and elsewhere that evidences that signature credit is lawful. He's got all that evidence. He's no longer arguing about that. He's just arguing that he hasn't seen all of the evidence from every single wages and tax transcript, and now he's trying to undermine the membership by making a complaint to the Wyoming Bar Association that somehow I need a license to do what I do. It's totally ridiculous. There's no substance to it. It is a tortious interference. It is another malicious act from Dan Neidle. And the Republic of Old Souls envoys are being attacked by Dan Neidle in the same way as the Matrix Freedom members were being attacked by the FCA, who claim that I may need a license. I don't need a license for anything I do. Providing information, writing technical reports, presenting generic webinars on how to solve problems does not need a regulatory license from any regulator anywhere in the world. And Dan Neidle, who is obviously an agent for the FCA, will lose in court. He will lose because his malicious attacks on me, on the membership of Matrix Freedom, on the membership and envoy of the Republic of Old Souls, he will lose because he's committing malicious falsehoods. He's saying things that are untrue. He's not doing any research. He's publishing falsehoods maliciously to undermine. And it's obvious that he's working for the establishment, who are terrified about losing the case against me in the UK Court of Appeal, which is now it's coming to a head now, where I'm putting more and more pressure on the UK Court of Appeal to put my case in front of a single judge. And I've also published all of the reasons why the single judge should annul and strike out and void that Order 34/2023. The whole thing is a legal nullity. Dan Neidle knows it. The UK Court of Appeal knows it. Everybody knows it who looks at the papers. But the UK Court of Appeal so far hasn't put the case in front of a judge. So let's just summarise this. Dan Neidle was attacking Ian Clifford during the Matrix Freedom days by publishing malicious falsehood, by publishing that Ian Clifford was practicing tax fraud. I never have practiced. I don't file tax returns. I don't do anything in relation to the filing of any tax return. I don't work for any organisation that files tax returns, so I can't be practicing tax fraud when I don't actually have a licence to do so and don't even do the activity. I am here as a consultant, as a technical consultant, and I present the webinars and I write the technical papers. So anybody who claims that Ian Clifford is providing a service is untrue. I'm not providing any services to any individual members. I don't provide any regulated services in any country. I provide information and education. Despite the fact that Dan Neidle knows all of that, he persists in making a complaint to the Wyoming Bar Association, claiming that I'm running a law firm, without a license, which he already knows is not the case. And he's then undermined, or trying to undermine, the trustee services that the MLITR Research is lawfully providing to the grantor trust. He's trying to undermine that as well. The second time he's trying to undermine the ROS, Matrix Freedom, now ROS members' recoupments. It's malicious, it's interference, it's tortious interference. He won't succeed. He will be made to look like a fool, the fool that he is. He doesn't do research. He rolls things out. He says crazy things. He writes crazy things. No research. How on earth did this guy ever become a partner at a Magic Circle law firm when he's so incompetent, doesn't do research, so biased, and the man is an imbecile? How on earth does he get away with this? Now, I say that because of all the interactions I've had with him over the last 2 to 3 months. He's acting as an agent for the FCA. I say that is damaging people's futures. I say that instead of protecting the consumer, I say that what Dan Neidle is doing is trying to damage the consumer, the members of Matrix Freedom, the envoys and members of Republic of Old Souls. I say that Dan Neidle's actions are potentially damaging the outcomes that everybody is seeking. He's already assisted Amy Sanger in undermining all of the recoupments from 2025, 600 million minimum, and now he's trying to do it again. He won't succeed. We will prevail, we will deliver, everybody will get what they are seeking, and Dan Neidle will be sued in the United States, in Wyoming, tortious interference into the recoupments and for his vicarious liability as an agent for the FCA. And if you want to read the detail of what MLITR Research does and how it does it, there is a very comprehensive document that was published on the 3rd of April, the compliance of Ecclesia Law as attorney in fact. This document goes into it in great detail if you want to read the details of why Ecclesia Law, a trading style of MLITR Research, is not providing any regulated services that require a licence.